Hey, listeners. Welcome to 10x Growth Strategies podcast. This is your host, Preethy Padmanabhan, technology executive, investor, and board member. Today, we will feature the book, Inflate Your Chances of Success. I have with me Praveen Sahay and Matt Polimeno. Matt Polimeno is the author of the book, and Praveen has written the foreword for the book. It is my pleasure to welcome them on stage. Let's get started. I would love to welcome you, Praveen, to introduce yourself and tell us about your key highlights from your journey.
Thank you, Preeti. It's a pleasure to be here. Um, it's been a long journey and a somewhat unusual one, full of discoveries along the way. I started off as a nuclear physicist, and then worked my way through oil and gas and other industries. Also joined the Indian Civil Services and the police. Was a battalion commander before I left the service. Also worked with the United Nations as a peacekeeper. So it was after 10 years of work that I came to the US to become a student again, a student of MBA program. And after MBA, have been working in venture capital for about 25 years now. Initially investing in software and telecommunication companies. And for the last 10 years, since I co-founded Wave, investing in climate-oriented innovations, which are industrial in nature. And we have now investments across various areas: energy and food and clean water, renewable energy, electric vehicle batteries, carbon capture, and so forth. Matt Polimeno joined us several years ago to fill a very important mission of Wave, which is to not only support the entrepreneurs financially, but also operationally, because the companies that we invest in are founded by very smart technologists and engineers who have never built a business before. And so it is not enough to give them capital. You also want to support them and coach them, mentor and guide them, hire their senior executives as well as workmen, so that and help them scale up their execution capabilities in different domains of operations, including manufacturing and supply chain and sales and marketing, distributions and IP management and artificial intelligence and so forth. And Matt Polimeno is our super guy for helping the companies scale up their operations, manufacturing, and supply chain management.
Thank you, Praveen. It's wonderful to see what the work Wave is doing in climate and all those cutting edge areas. That is very close to my heart because I spent some couple of years in climate technology. And I completely agree with you. Matt is certainly a superpower to have. And I'll turn it to Matt to introduce himself.
Thank you, Preeti. Yeah, I wouldn't call myself a superpower. I don't like the term expert or superpower because that implies I really don't have anything else to learn, and that's not true. Even just talking to Praveen on a daily basis, I learn different aspects of businesses and the market that are vital just for me personally and for me to help do my job. But a little bit about me. I went to RPI. I'm a mechanical engineer by degree. So if you told me back then if I was ever going to write a book, I probably would have laughed at you. And then I've really been blessed in my career. So, I went to work for high technology companies like McDonnell Douglas that became Boeing, had some very good mentors that I, actually still speak to this day. And then I moved to a privately owned company, that makes storage systems, very basic but high production items. And then from there, I've actually moved to a few startups, more high technology. But, throughout that journey, I've had some people like Praveen that have allowed me, and in some cases forced me as a young engineer and professional to be uncomfortable in what I was doing. But each of those journeys helped me learn, really the basis for the book, and not only the questions, but why they're important in forming a business, anywhere from being the VP of Ops at Segway to just running, a lab, 3 years out of college at Boeing. So, all the credit really goes to people like Praveen and others that have helped guide me on my journey.
Love that. Love that. Appreciate how humble and, how direct and open you are in sharing your background. And I certainly agree, lifelong learning is a superpower we all need to leverage. We talked about your book, and that is the, purpose of this podcast, to talk about your book. I did read about different stories you wrote in the book and some of the mentors you had. Tell us, why did you choose to write this book?
Yeah, I started the book, this is not good to say, but over 6.5 years ago. And then I was speaking with and mentoring a young person that Praveen knows, Sartek, and he told me to get off my you know what. So I finished the book. But the real reason behind the book is throughout my career, I've either audited companies for places I've worked at or for Wave. And it became obvious that people just don't know what they don't know, for lack of better words. So you go into these companies and ask questions that, I think are just common sense, but they really aren't. So like Praveen mentioned, you have these people that are brilliant, that come up with these ideas that Praveen and I have talked about where, I don't have that skill set. Like I can't be working at something at home. I just get it done or I find a way to do it. And the people Praveen and I know, they're like, they'll stop, wait a moment and come up with an invention to do it better. Right. So this is really to help them do more of the execution frame. It's really an outline so you can do a gap analysis of your company. So, really to grow from, trying to start your business on your own to really being able to execute, sales, service, purchasing, et cetera, really trying to complete that puzzle.
I love, it's amazing. You talked about what you don't know, you don't know. This is something even a coach had talked to me early on in my career, because you always have awareness of what you know and what you don't know. But this third element is almost like 70-80% of all the mistakes happen in that what you don't know, you don't know. And so I appreciate that you decided to write this book and share that with founders. Praveen, would love to hear your perspective. Why is this topic of due diligence and other pieces that Matt is covering in his book important for venture investing?
Due diligence is often thought of as an exercise to find holes or weaknesses that may exist in a team or a company or a business model. But due diligence is actually a lot more than that. Due diligence, most of the due diligence by private equity funds or venture capital funds focuses on these are the representations by the company. Are these representations true? That is a sort of a very negative way of thinking about due diligence. Due diligence is really discovering the identity and the purpose of an organization. Why does it exist? And where can it go? And so it is not only about finding out the holes, but really about discovering the true potential of a business model theoretically, and then what does the company do in order to get to that place? And it really comes down to not only the technology or the product, you are in fact going to be building a whole organization. So the different people and different functions and the culture of the organization, and who you are going to partner with, and what kind of investors and customers you're going to win in order to get to the place where you think you deserve to grow to. So due diligence, the set of questions that Matt Potter, for example, or the checklists that he's put together is not so much to say, do I do this or not? It really is aimed at the founders, leading them into a contemplative mode and a reflective mode, where they look at the questions and say, okay, are these questions relevant to me now? If not now, maybe sometime later. And are these, and do I need to find the answers to these questions now or sometime later? but it is the set of questions that you need to be asking yourself. And because most of the time the founders are driven by this sense of urgency, it's day by day survival. There is not even time to reflect on these questions. But these questions are very important elements of the journey of the company. And so these questions, the checkbooks, should be on the shelf of every founder, so that they occasionally, pull the back, pull the book and look into its content and get into a reflective mode for even 5 or 10 minutes or half an hour, whatever time they can afford.
Absolutely. I like that thought you talked about, right? That the venture investor is not just looking to point out issues or, find the holes, because many entrepreneurs might approach investors thinking that way. But the truth is, investors are very much vested in the success of the entrepreneur. I personally, as an angel investor, and I'm an LP in a few funds, I really want the entrepreneur to succeed. And I can see that, right, in what you shared. And this great handbook of how they can actually present themselves, how the founders can present themselves in the best light. And I loved what you said, like, this is not a one and done thing, right? They can self reflect on it from time to time. That way they pull themselves out of their weeds, because often enough we get into the weeds, we get into execution, and we are doing stuff again and again. And so how do we take our heads out and actually look at broader picture and make sure we are tight on all the aspects, right? I saw that Matt had covered engineering, product, marketing, sales, legal, right, HR. Like, he had really having a broad perspective. Let's then jump into some of the sharings or takeaways. Praveen, would love to hear your top takeaways. What were some things you think are worth highlighting today?
It is truly about the journey of a company from a young startup to hopefully a very successful long-term franchise that they create. During that journey, the company changes and the entrepreneurial team changes its character in many significant ways. It goes from a survival mode where you're just trying to survive, day by day, to first conforming to what is expected of a growing startup. So you bring on other people, you bring out, you build up the different functions in the team. You start to think about not just the individual, that founder, but a collective, and how to maximize the true potential of all of the members of the team, how to set common purpose and goals for that team and lead everybody into a common direction. Also, putting the goals of the organization above yourself. In many cases, for example, the founders may decide that they need to not only give more autonomy to other people who are better experts in other domains of execution, but maybe even replace themselves with another person, maybe hired person who has a lot more experience of leading a company to the kind of successful outcome that they want for themselves. So it is really going from individual to collective. The other aspect is, at the same time, there is a lot more differentiation that happens in the activities in the organizations. So, initially the entire focus is on technology and product, but now you start to get into scaling up manufacturing, or supply chain management, or integrating your product into the existing distribution channels, building out your sales and marketing expertise and your strategy in those directions. So there is a level of differentiation that starts to happen in all of the activities and thinking and strategy of the company. And so on the people side, you're hiring different expertise. On the process sides, you're differentiating more and more and specializing in different domains. And finally, you are trying to integrate into an existing ecosystem. Whether you're a technology company or a manufacturing company, there is an existing value chain in that industry. And regardless of how good or bad your innovation is, you are not successful until you are integrated into the existing value chain. And so that process of integration also requires significant amount of looking at the company from outside in and figuring out who the best partners potentially could be, and how to reach out into those value chains. So the company grows in many ways, in people and person and the identity of the company and how things get done. And all of those are learned expertise. Nobody has all of these learnings when they start a company, unless they are a second or a third time founder. Then it's a different story. But most of the time in our sector, they are not. It's the first rodeo. They have never built and exited a company before. And so it is our job as investors, as directors in the company, to bring in advisors, to bring in coaches, to bring in people like Matt, who we call operating partners in the fund, to go into the companies, ask those questions, and get the companies the right amount of help at the right time so that they can build these people and functions and roles and identities within the company.
That sounds great. I think certainly that covers the entire gamut of building the company from conception to scale. Matt, would you like to add additional thoughts on takeaways? It'll be good to discuss.
Yeah, I mean, you and Praveen both mentioned this early about mentoring, right? The book is really a self-assessment tool. Like, I'm a mentor at the Clean Tech Open Northeast, and your job as a mentor is not to provide answers, right? Because long-lasting change, I believe, comes when it becomes, I don't know, self-evident that something needs to happen. So when you look at the gaps that might be found by reading this, like Praveen mentioned, you determine what's needed and not needed, for your company, right? I mean, that's pretty powerful, right? And like Praveen mentioned, you're going from I don't know if you want to call it a heroic solo leadership position, but really trying to build a team that can operate focus with clarity and shared responsibility. So I really look at it as a mentoring tool. I mean, you read it, some sections won't even apply to your business, but then when you read a certain section, and I try to add some context where possible, not just the question you're going to get hit with, but why it's important. And it could be a trivial item, like whether accounts payable is late or not, or, something more relevant to leadership, like how you're going to manage, how do you get people more out of people than they think they can get out of themselves. So, I really look at it as a self-assessment tool that hopefully the leaders or entrepreneurs can go, just get to the point where they realize some of these items are important for scale.
And these are all the most important takeaways. You grow up thinking about who you are, what you do, how you do it best, what kind of innovation and product you can bring to the market. Eventually, it has to become outside in. What is the purpose of all this? It's not only to be individually successful, but really to create a contribution that has a long lasting effect on your customers and more broadly on the society and maybe the future generations. If you're in the climate space, you really want to think about your long term impact on the humanity and the planet. And so a lot of this, these set of questions are designed to set yourself into that perspective so that you look at yourself and your company and the little thing you're doing in this big ocean of humanity, why you're doing this, and how do you do it better so that you create a more meaningful contribution that will outlast you.
That makes perfect sense. I always love to ask for examples. I would love to see if there are any examples of companies, that you can mention, or any entrepreneurs that you think have done this well in terms of how they got through the survival mode or challenges. Even if you have to anecdotally mention a certain type of company, that would be great. And how did they get to scale and beyond?
I mean, every company is an example, and a good example. We started this, investment program, Wave, almost 10 years ago, And the very first investments we made, those companies have grown in revenues to hundreds of millions of dollars from $500,000 at the time of our initial investment. So they all have done very, very interesting things. But the very first order of how to grow right is figuring out the right product market fit. So we invested in a company, because they had a breakthrough in chemistry where they could manufacture the best quality of insulation material. It's called aerogels at a very affordable cost. So that was the invention. Now, what product do you go with and where do you discover the best opportunity for you is a whole different exercise. People, were thinking about applying this insulation to home insulation or picnic basket insulation, refrigerator insulation, refrigerated trucks insulation, aircrafts. There are super abundant opportunities. Eventually, where they decided to focus, where we all, put our heads together and decided to focus on, was the cold supply chain for pharmaceutical industry. So vaccines and medicines, which are increasingly more and more require temperature control. Um, they require very sophisticated supply chain where you are able to maintain the right temperature band that is needed for that specific vaccines or medicine. So, for example, when Pfizer COVID vaccines came out, they required very stringent temperature control of colder than -50 degrees Celsius. So they started to use our products because they were the most effective in holding the right temperature band. And now, that company is in hundreds of millions of dollars of revenue. They're signing purchase orders, which are, hundreds of millions of dollars a piece. So, getting from a insulation manufacturer with a chemistry breakthrough to the right product market fit where you create tremendous demand for your product because there is nothing else like it in the marketplace. It's a very interesting journey, and it requires deep thinking about your capabilities, your strategy, your understanding of the marketplace, choosing the marketplace. You come from a marketing background, Preeti, and figuring out the various addressable markets and segmenting them and finding out where you have the best fit for where you are in terms of scale and capabilities is absolutely critical to winning in the marketplace.
Yeah, that's very interesting. You bring that up because I am meeting entrepreneurs every week, and at least talk to like 3 or 4 entrepreneurs. And yesterday, I got to speak to an entrepreneur who was exactly trying to solve that problem. They have like a product in hand, but which is the hottest market to go after, and who has the biggest pain point that would require the product. The idea was great. The product is very important to solve. The challenge is important to solve. But who would then bite it? Who would then be willing to pay for such a solution? And that journey for every entrepreneur, the 2 people might have the same idea, but the way they would execute and how they would take it to market will determine whether they are successful or they fail. Right? That's what I'm realizing.
The other very important aspect is once you have the right product market fit, who are your partners that will help you along the way? I talked about the process of integration. So the company needs to integrate, and this is more true in industrial markets than it in the software. In the software, people can go alone for a long time because their cost of replication is not very high. But in industrial markets, if you're making an electric vehicle battery and no automaker cares for your batteries, then all your work is completely in vain. You haven't succeeded in anything. One of the companies that Matt is working very closely with right now is an industrial cleaning company. So they make these novel cleaning solutions which are cheaper, faster, greener, better than all of the incumbent cleaning solvents which are used in the industry. So one is the prioritization, which markets you go after, because they can go after the automotive or the oil and gas or petrochemicals or microelectronics. There are multiple choices. But once you decide which dimensions or where you are prioritizing, you need to figure out how do you get into that market. You need to have the right partners who will help you integrate into those value chains and act as a distribution partner, as a customer, may perhaps, maybe a co-manufacturing partner, bring in the feedback from the market and say, you need to tweak your product in a certain way to best fit what the market needs. Um, and so selecting the right partner is a very important element once you have decided what markets are important to you. And so that's another focus area for Wave. And we have only 13 portfolio companies, but more than 50 global corporations that have invested in and partnered with these companies. Finding the right partners is absolutely the way to win.
Yeah, and then Preethi, I'm sorry, but to Praveen's point on market fit, like I worked for a startup for 10 years called Beacon Power. And, we had, in my career, this was probably the best technical team ever. And when we first started, we chose the wrong market. Like everyone believed we can make something for the telecom market, and we just were never going to get there cost-wise. So now you have a team that has all the technical strengths in the world to create a product no one still can make, with plants operating in Pennsylvania and New York. And it took a visionary, I guess I'll mention his name, Bill Cap, to come in to get us all to refocus, have meetings like what market can we apply to, right? And it's to Praveen's point, great technology, poor market fit to begin with, and next thing you know, you go from 130 people to 30 and you're restarting again. Right. But we built the company back up. And even after that, when you talk a market, we were in a market that 4 industry experts, independent, said would work. And we were bullied out of the market. Right. So even external sources can make the best team fail if you don't have all pieces to the puzzle. And that's what I'm trying to convey to the book. I can't tell you when you're looking at the different topics what's more important to your business. But like Praveen says, it's there to create thought. Create some insight, step back from the daily grind and really examine what you need to do. Is this important? Is that important? Where do I want to go? And that's all we're trying to do, is just to help.
Matt, maybe, your first suggestion to the entrepreneur should have been write a personal diary every night.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe. It's just, it's difficult because it's funny. A couple people have really given me some good feedback on the book. And one I like is, it's kind of funny because I've been stereotyped as being very direct, too direct in some cases, and one person wrote, this guy actually works for a living, which is nice. And then one person that read the book, I still talk to on a weekly basis because they have questions. And I mean, Praveen knows I like to mentor. Right. So, try to be able to help where I can. And that's why I'm in the Clean Tech Open. So.
No, that's great. It's great that you mentored so many founders and how you're adding value to all of them, Matt. I'm sure they really appreciate that. Well, I know that we can keep talking about this topic for a long time, but what are some final thoughts that you can share with the audience here? Praveen, you want to get started?
The life of an entrepreneur is a very difficult one, but also a very self-fulfilling one. I tell entrepreneurs, you don't know who you are as a person until you have started a company, because it challenges you, it stretches you in so many different ways. It allows you to discover that it can change your self-identity. You discover strengths you never knew you had. And so it is a difficult journey, for most people, not every time. But I mean, I see these AI entrepreneurs who go out and raise $100 million after, 4 months of effort. They will probably have, different challenges than the ones that I am used to seeing. But the capital scarcity, the process of bringing on people and lighting a fire under them, in their belly to succeed despite all of the adverse circumstances. It's a very difficult journey, individually and collectively. So I have deepest respect. We are entrepreneurs too. We started a new fund. and we are still struggling. We are still in a growth mode, and we face the same difficulties as any other entrepreneur would. So we have a deep understanding and empathy with the whole process. But the world is improving every day because of these entrepreneurs, and there is a reason why America, despite all of the flaws that people talk about, still leads the world and shines a beacon on the path of progress. It is all because of the entrepreneurial spirit, and I feel extremely grateful that I'm living this life with the entrepreneurs every day.
That's great to hear. It's certainly good to help fulfill the American dream. Matt, would you like to add any final insights?
No, I mean, I think Praveen said it more eloquently than I ever will. But the intent of the book really, I'm not going to get rich, right? It's a very targeted audience. The goal is really to just make people more self-aware of what they're doing, and just really reflect on the next steps and how to get their dreams to be reality. It is really heartbreaking when you talk all the companies we do that don't make it to our watch list, to our pipeline, and some of it, it's heartbreaking in some cases. So I'm just trying to give people an advantage just to be able to self-reflect and hopefully, reach their dreams. That's the goal.
Thank you. Thank you, Matt and Praveen, for being part of 10x Growth Strategies podcast. It has been a pleasure to have you on this episode. Listeners, check out the book on Amazon, Inflate Your Chances of Success by Matt Polimeno. Thank you, Praveen. Thank you, Matt.
Thanks, Preethy. Thank you very much.
Thank you all. It's a wonderful occasion to get to know all of you. Take care.